Hey everybody, this is D Hunter bringing another action figure review. Today, we're going to look at the McFarlane DC Multiverse New 52 Swamp Thing. I believe this is a GameStop exclusive. This is the variant with antlers. Sort of think of him as Swamp Thing in battle mode or berserker mode. You can get angry, grow some antlers, often wings in the comics, and then go fight. This is the third variant of Swamp Thing. We have the regular version, then the unpainted artist-proof platinum chase variant, and now the antler variant. Let's go and take a look at the packaging. As you can see, ages 12 plus, DC Multiverse Swamp Thing. This version is based off the New 52. The other one is based off the Rebirth Swamp Thing. At the bottom, got a bunch of credits, and there is a barcode, in case that helps anybody. And on the back, here's Swamp Thing posed up with his antlers, and here are a bunch of other recently released McFarlane DC Multiverse figures you should check out. So no further ado, let's open him up. Alright, now that we got this figure out of the package, here he is with all his accessories laid out. He does come with a display stand, a collector's card, and then an alternate right hand, sort of a weaponized plant vine. But before we take a look at the accessories, let's talk about and check out the actual figure. So this is Swamp Thing. This is based off his look in the New 52. New 52 had a lot of kind of unconventional looks. Some of them worked, some of them didn't. I much prefer the normal Rebirth looking Swamp Thing. Let's take a look at him. Start with his head here. So, of course, he's got these giant antlers. Looks kind of ridiculous, honestly. Further down, everything else seems to be the same for the Rebirth Swamp Thing. I like the face. He's got that Swamp Thing signature mustache. I'm glad they went with that look. Eyes are red. Coloring the paint job is very nice in this guy. Brown, green, all kind of different shades. It's certainly not just one color across the thing. Even his teeth look pretty cool. A little bit of a snarly look. He's got single jointed elbows. Looks like double jointed knees. Ton of sculpt and detail all over this guy. I've seen some really cool custom paint jobs to really bring out the sculpt. Even some flowers on the back. Could use some nice painting. Figure's fantastic. My favorite of the three is going to be the standard Swamp Thing, but it's cool to have a bunch of different variants and incarnations. And just a closer look at his face or head sculpt. And then, here's the figure broken down as far as he can go, with all of his removable parts detached. Now let's take a look at his accessories, and let's start off with the boring stuff. Here's his display stand, typical McFarlane stand, black perfect circle, says DC at the bottom, one peg for the peg holes on his feet, very thin, very basic. Here's his collector's card. As you can see, it's an image of Swamp Thing with his antlers, going through the swamp. Swamp Thing from the New 52. On the back side, there is a description if you want to read that. Go ahead and pause now. Here's his collector's card, next to the standard Rebirth Swamp Thing collector's card. Then, next to the unpainted Platinum Chase variant artist proof collector's card. Now let's look at his alternate right hand. It's sort of vine-like, his hand turned into a weapon. Kind of makes you think of something Clayface would do. You can see the articulation back here. It's hinged. It should rotate as well. And honestly, it kind of looks like a giant nugget of weed. Here's Swamp Thing with his two regular hands. Then, with his alternate weapon right hand. Here's Swamp Thing with his weapon hand, running through the swamp chasing after somebody. Now I do actually have three of these alternate hands. One from each version of Swamp Thing. Rebirth, New 52, and Unpainted. Now his right hand is the only hand that comes out easily. I'm going to take some hot water, heat up his left hand, pull it out, and give him two weaponized hands. Here's Swamp Thing in an aggressive stance with both weaponized hands. Like I said before, it's only intended to go with the right hand. I'd use hot water to pop the left hand out. I think it looks pretty cool. Now one accessory would be nice this guy came with would be some wings. Often the antler Swamp Thing would have some giant wings. It'd be cool if we had something like that that was removable, but I do understand the cost factor. Now that we've taken a pretty good look at both the figure and his accessories, now let's check out his height, and he is a big boy. McFarlane's biggest DC Multiverse figure yet. From bottom to the top of his head, he's standing at about 11.1 inches tall, which can translate to about 28 centimeters, and if you go to the top of the antlers, about 12.1 inches tall. And while we're on the subject of his height, here he is next to a couple of standard-sized McFarlane DC Multiverse figures. They're about 7 inches tall. He's not twice as big as them, but he's bigger than 1.5 Multiverse figures. Now let's check out his articulation. Start with his head here. Of course, it can rotate from side to side. He can't look up about that far, down about that much. Can't tilt his head from one side to the other. Give him a good amount of personality. Shoulder on a ball joint goes up about 90 degrees. Notice his vine stuff, very soft. Doesn't obstruct anything, goes right over the shoulder. Up, down, around, all that good stuff. Mine's very tight still. He's got a butterfly joint between his shoulder and chest area. There's increased range of motion there. Bicep cut below that. Single jointed elbow, about 90 degree. Does have rotation. His wrist can rotate, and it's hinged. His torso here, he's got a ball joint. Can rotate around, go forward and back. His waist, another ball joint, rotate around, forward and back. Give him good range of motion, although I feel like this one could be freed up with maybe some hot water. His legs, pretty much complete as a splits. Not a ball joint, but a similar type idea. Rotation, minimal, but a little bit. His legs go forward about that far. Back, not much. Double jointed knees below that. Then his ankle here, he can go forward and back, can rotate, can tilt and rock, and he has toe articulation. And I did want to check him out next to the regular Rebirth version of Swamp Thing to see if there were any differences besides the obvious antlers. And it sure does not look like it. Looks to be a 100% identical figure, except the antlers attached. Even the heads are exactly the same, minus the antlers. They just simply took the Rebirth Swamp Thing, added the antlers to his head. Even the hair is the same. I would have figured that at least gives a whole new head sculpt. Both really cool figures, though. Here's Alec Holland, working in his lab. Until his lab explodes under mysterious circumstances, Alec Holland is covered in chemicals and fire. He jumps into the swamp to save his life, transforming him into Swamp Thing. And I always remember Swamp Thing taking on some large creatures or monsters. Here's Swamp Thing fighting NECA's Ultimate Kessler Wolf. And here, taking on a McFarlane Witcher Ice Giant. And then, being overrun by a large McFarlane Witcher Kikamura. Here's Swamp Thing choking a couple of McFarlane Stranger Things Demogorgons. And then chilling with a couple of his tree ant buddies. Which one do you guys think will be the boss of the swamp? We got this giant tree ant, or Swamp Thing. Here's a woman handing a flower to Swamp Thing. This figure works for a good fill-in for his wife or girlfriend, Abigail Arcane. It looks like they could be best buddies. And say you got Poison Ivy. She gets into the swamp. She's escaping Gotham City, hiding from Batman. She feels very comfortable here in the wild with all the green. Poison Ivy is intrigued by the Swamp Thing. She's heard of him, but never seen anything quite like this before. She thinks to herself, she could do a lot with Swamp Thing. If she can control him, just like she can control plants, she could use them to help eliminate the Batman. She reaches up in what the Swamp Thing thinks is in friendship. She works her magic. She has pheromones. She has the ability to control plants. She doesn't even have to kiss him. He's not a typical organic person. Here's Poison Ivy with her new bodyguard, her new minion Swamp Thing behind her. He's a gray color now, kind of lifeless, doesn't have his own energy. Here's Swamp Thing having a seat, kind of holding his head as he's shaking off Poison Ivy's control. Poison Ivy doesn't realize just how powerful Swamp Thing is. She thought she'd control him a little more easily than that. This could also work as a nice little shot. Swamp Thing, his head's hurting as his antlers are starting to grow in, as the boy becomes a man. And here's Swamp Thing about to get his revenge on Ivy. Now let's check him out next to some other action figures, starting off with some other McFarlane DC Multiverse figures. Here he is, next to the standard Rebirth version of Swamp Thing. Then, next to the Platinum Chase variant, unpainted, artist-proof Swamp Thing figure. Here are all 3 different variations of Swamp Thing. And as far as figures, to get 3 different variations, Swamp Thing is about as nice a figure as you'll get from McFarlane, so he deserves it. And honestly, I like each variation for what they bring to the table. I will say that the regular Rebirth Swamp Thing is my favorite, followed by Antlers, and then that gray thing. Here's Swamp Thing, next to all the other McFarlane DC Multiverse Mega figures they've made so far. A Mega figure is essentially a large, oversized deluxe figure, costs about $40, too large to fit in standard packaging. Swamp Thing is by far the tallest of them, and Antler Swamp Thing is the tallest of the 3 Swamp Thing figures. The next 2 Mega figures they're making are Titan Joker and Clayface, and rumor is the next 2 after that are going to be Man-Bat and Killer Croc. And here he is, with all the different McFarlane DC Multiverse Build-A-Figures. We have Darkfather, the Joker Batman Robot, Merciless, then Bane and King Shark. These are larger figures, but pale in comparison to McFarlane's Mega figures. Then, here's Swamp Thing, next to a couple of older, larger McFarlane DC Multiverse figures. You can see just how far they've come. They've definitely come a long way in the art of making big action figures. Here's Swamp Thing, next to some other comic-style DC heroes. Now let's check him out, next to some other recently released McFarlane DC Multiverse figures. Here he is, next to a couple of Lobo figures. Then, next to a couple of Lex Luthor figures. Here he is, next to Superboy Prime and the Dark Knight Returns Armored Batman, Blue Edition. Then, next to the Birds of Prey Harley Quinn and the Mortal Kombat 11 Joker. And here he is, next to the recently released 3 Jokers wave. Still trying to track down Batman for this wave. Then, next to Nightwing and Red Hood from Gotham Knights. And here's Swamp Thing, next to the Year 2 Batman. Now let's check him out, next to some other Swamp Thing figures. Here are all 3 variations of the McFarlane Swamp Thing. And here he is, next to a DC Direct, DC Comics Essential Swamp Thing. DC Comics Essentials is not the same as DC Essentials. Yes, it's a thing. Then, next to a bunch of older Kenner Swamp Thing movie figures. I used to use these as Poison Ivy henchmen way back in the day when there was nothing else. And here's my entire collection of Swamp Thing figures. There are plenty I'm missing. Now let's check them out, next to some other plant-type action figures or creatures. Here he is, with all my different Poison Ivy figures. I always thought it was cool having Poison Ivy interacting with Swamp Thing. The next several comparisons are going to be with figures that I predominantly use for Poison Ivy creations or henchmen in my action figure collection. I'm going to start off by showing Swamp Thing with some of these smaller, crappier ones, and work my way larger. Here he is, with a couple of plant creatures. These are some children's toys by Schleek Toys. Then, next to a couple of Playmates, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles animated Snakeweed figures. And here, next to Biolante, he's a Godzilla villain. Then, next to a couple of Mattel, Masters of the Universe Revelations Mossman figures. And here, next to a couple of Resident Evil plant monsters. These are probably my favorite Poison Ivy henchmen that I have. Here's Swamp Thing, next to a couple of Stranger Things Demogorgon figures. These are the crappier version by Bandai. And then, next to the nicer Stranger Things Demogorgon by McFarlane Toys. I always thought this would be a nice Poison Ivy creation. They're kind of organic, but the way their head looks, like a flower opening up. Here's Swamp Thing, next to a Hasbro Marvel Legends Groot. And here, next to a couple of Toy Biz Lord of the Rings Treebeard Ents. And then, next to an even larger Toy Biz Lord of the Rings Treebeard. I guess Swamp Thing is not my largest plant action figure. Now let's check out Swamp Thing, next to some other McFarlane Mega figures, not from their DC line. Like I said before, a Mega figure is pretty much an oversized deluxe figure. They run about $40. Some more, some less. Here's Swamp Thing, next to a Princess Bride, Fezzik. And then, next to a Witcher 3 Wild Hunt Ice Giant. And here, next to the Netflix Witcher Kikamura. And here, next to a Spawn Violator. Now let's check them out. Next to some action figures from different various companies to see how he fits in both scale and style-wise, in case you want to know which lines you can mix him with. Since he's a McFarlane figure, they're typically the 7-inch scale. This guy might be over 11 inches tall, but he's still to be scaled up with 7-inch tall figures. I'm going to start off my comparisons with some of the larger action figure lines I collect, and work way smaller. Here he is, next to some of his McFarlane Toys brothers. In front of you are 5 different action figure lines, all from McFarlane Toys, all 7-inch scale. Then, next to some more McFarlane Toys, these are from different various video game properties. And now, next to some Jakks-specific wrestling figures. And here he is, next to some DST or Diamond Select toys. And here, with some NECA figures. Then, next to some Mattel wrestling figures. And now, next to some Jazzwares AEW wrestling figures. And here he is, next to some Mezco 112 collective figures. Then, next to some Mattel DC Universe Classics and Multiverse figures. And here, next to some Mayfax figures. Then, next to some Hasbro Marvel Legends. And here he is, next to some SH Figure Arts action figures. And finally, next to some Jazzwares Fortnite figures. Overall, this is a very nice figure, but is he worth an extra $40 just for a different head sculpt? The answer is no. I've seen a lot of people say it'd be nice if they would just include the extra head for a few extra dollars. This is a prime example of that. Do not misunderstand me. I love the variants, but I'm not the usual type of collector. I'm a completist. I'm happy to have all 3 of these Swamp Things. But if I were to just pick one, it would definitely be the Rebirth Swamp Thing. This guy's sculpt is absolutely fantastic. Paint job is really good, although I've seen some really superb custom paint jobs on these Swamp Thing figures out there. His accessory, the alternate hand, it's pretty nice. I'm not really sure what else he should come with. If I were to rate this guy, I'd give an 8 out of 10. A little bit lower than I gave the Rebirth Swamp Thing, but it's still a fantastic figure. McFarlane has outdone themselves with these mega figures. Sure, they're $40, but they seem to be worth every penny. I can't wait for Clayface. So this is D Hunter. Thank you guys for watching this video. If you liked the video, press like below. If you have anything you want to say about the video, add to the comment section. If you want to see additional action figure reviews from me, press subscribe. I do appreciate when you do that. Once again, this is D Hunter. Thank you guys for watching this video, and I'll talk to you guys real soon.